Yeah! Happy Comic Book Day and welcome back, all you four-color funny book aficionados. This is USComics Cast, HQ for all things comic book connected. We are John and Charlie Rivera, the co-founders of USComics. Charlie, happy Comic Book Day.
Happy Comic Book Day to you and to everyone listening and watching today. As always, we're brought to you by Bad Mary Band and Sergeant Finesse Gaming. If you haven't done so already, please smash that like and or follow button and hit that comment section like it was one final letter to the editor.
Oh, Charlie, today is not just Comic Book Day. Today is not just the last US Comic Cast live episode in 2022. No, Charlie. Today is also, as well as, a very important day on the calendar. Why, you ask? Why, you ask?
Why?
There it is. Because 100 years ago today, what are the odds? December 28th. Charlie's hacking up a lung. December 28th, 1922. There was born onto the world a veritable angel. Certainly the first and most dominant face on the Mount Rushmore of comic books.
Comic books George Washington.
Oh my God, I'm talking about none other than Mr. Stanley Martin Lieber, a.k.a. the GOAT, a.k.a. Stan Lee. Cousin Paul's right. Excelsior! Oh, man. Happy birthday. 100 years young to the dearly departed Stan Lee. Unbelievable.
I mean, a century of the world being better for having Stan Lee play a part. The first guy involved in comics I ever knew about. I thought comic books, the same way I thought movies and television were like spit out of the sky by the gods above us.
They just grow like carrots out of the ground.
Exactly. Stan Lee was the first one. Thank you to Kevin Smith for having him show up in Mallrats and me get a lesson on all things about stretchy ding-dongs in the Fantastic Four, rock-shaped dongers, fire dongers, and invisible vaginas.
I can only imagine that little baby Charlie, definitely not old enough to be watching most Kevin Smith's affair, was like, oh, snap. Reed Richards has a stretchy schwatz? That never occurred to me. Just starts trying to pull it apart like taffy. Cousin Paul would be happy to know that the things Rocky Johnson, the first Rocky Johnson before the rest
Rocky Johnson to never turn people off on Twitter. That Rocky Johnson only turned people on, even blind broads. If you have the comic books, John, I'm gonna jump right on, top of this topic, right out of the gate, because it's I mean it quite literally
like a Ben Grimm Rocky Schwartz.
That's right.
Do it.
The Stan Lee was legitimately the first creator I ever knew about. Stan Lee being the grandfather of Marvel Comics was info I got the same time I got that comic books were written. Never noticed a writer on a comic book page. I would never check out the editorial section. So my introduction to Stan Lee was the realization that this shit is written by people, and that perchance the quality, if you follow certain creators, certain editors, certain artists, might be similar. That's kind of how I learned the difference between good shit and bad shit. Was at this beautiful sweater wearing mustachioed man who I thought had a beard, because in Mallrats it's a full little beard scheme. Stan Lee was that guy, and what's amazing is that there's a huge gap between Mallrats and all those Marvel cameos. That when
a tremendous gap in both visibility and sadly income. because Stan Lee, along with certainly Siegel and Schuster, not so much Bob Kane, shockingly, because he said, "Look, if you're gonna put the Scroogey to me, I'm gonna put the Scroogey to other people first."
Yeah.
But like most of those early creators who were in essence kind of pushed out of the collecting the Shkadol process, Stan Lee was absolutely on the forefront of that all. So thankfully, we were really able to give him his due, if not earlier in the game, later in the game. Justice be done.
I mean, and Stan Lee was always what I love about that. And I kind of, from my end, it's just going to be me telling people all the things I love about Stan Lee. Because
that's what today's for, man.
He is a person worth celebrating. I know not everyone is into celebrating people's birthdays after they pass. I kind of think it's nice. Gives you a couple bites at the apple to think back on someone amazing.
Sure.
But for Stan Lee, one of the very first stories I got in your comic book shop, the comic book shop you took me to, that I was able to pedal my bike to, one of the very first Stan Lee stories I got inspired my love affair with Daredevil, because they stole Spider-Man from Stan. They said, "No, sorry, old man." And this was like 60 years ago. They were trying to call him old man. Little did they know he had only begun to be an old man. They took away the ability. They wouldn't let him write Spider-Man stories. So they said, "You know what? I'm going to create a character better than Spider-Man in my estimation." And thus Daredevil was born. And the silhouette, the Spider-Man momentum silhouette, that's a Daredevil design. All that stuff was spite-driven, which I love. Because if you see Stan Lee in interviews, especially later in his life, he's such a lovable guy. He's such a huggable. He's everybody's grandfather. But there was a time where he was like, I can't.
He was the guy who, for me, and again, to many people's surprise, I'm actually slightly older than Charlie, but for me, he was without a question the first adult that spoke about comic books the way that I did. Right, Stan Lee, for all of his contributions, and obviously we'll go through them, because that's what a day like today is for. It's for us. Stan is no longer with us, so hopefully, and I know for a fact, amongst many of us like-minded folks, we had the opportunity and took it to tell the dude how much he meant to us, how thankful we were, how much we appreciate him. So I'm grateful that this is a guy who didn't kind of like slip off quietly into the night. But we were throwing parades for him while he was with us, and he got that adulation towards the end, if not never before. But but like you were saying, dude, like he talked about comic books with love, with reverence. Like I remember one of the particular quotes that struck me very, very early on was that, he was saying if Shakespeare and Leonardo da Vinci were alive right now, they would be drawing and writing comic books, because this is our medium, right? The creators create in the medium, and that's the type of stuff that really stuck with me, because if you have a good idea, you might imagine it as a flick, you might imagine it as a play, you might imagine it as whatever the hell, sitting around the beach, people just spitting stories. But this gave you this gave you the okay to imagine it as a comic book, because it was a valid storytelling platform, and he meant it. He wasn't just talking out of school. He held them up on a pedestal, and that's where they friggin' belong. Let me ask you this, Charlie, because we make it very quickly, and obviously, you've made your opinion very clear on the hierarchy between Spider-Man and Daredevil. But like you mentioned, that motion, that's one of the most visually striking things when I think about both of those characters. And Spider-Man predated Daredevil, so it was in the Spidey books first. But like Daredevil said, if you have a good idea, baby, why fucking throw it away? So, again, you have Spider-Man, Hulk, Iron Man, Black Panther, many of the very early X-Men, Thor, certainly the Fantastic Four, and that was like really the first Marvel bite at the apple. We're talking about this guy was involved with Marvel before it was Marvel. So when we talk about those first phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you're in essence looking at the resume or the CV, if any of our listeners and viewers overseas, of Stan Lee. Like this is his fever dream. This is his work laid out that is collecting billions and billions of dollars. Doctor Strange, Ant-Man, Black Widow, Silver Surfer, Doctor Doom, Nick Fury, Hawkeye, Daredevil, like you said, Green Goblin, Black Bolt. I mean, it's ridiculous. You could
good characters and characters like Black Bolt,
Lee.
Both the good and the bad. The guy, you can't bat 1,000. John, did you know with a single whisper, Black Bolt could get his head exploded by Wanda? No, the list is never ending, because what was amazing about Stan Lee was at some point he got his fingerprints in everything. Like Stan Lee was not only a great creator, he was a tremendous collaborator. He was an advocate for stories and characters that he thought could and probably should, be pushed to the forefront. If you look at the success, like you said, of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that foundation is absolutely mixed and poured by Stan the Man. Thing.
And you talk about collaboration and whatnot, so it doesn't hurt when you are working with fellow male receivers on the comic book Mount Rushmore, because like his collaborators, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, John Romita Sr. Like if you're gonna go to war, these are the cats that you want to have wrapped around with you. But yeah, like you when you say you can go on and on with the characters that he created, that's not an exaggeration, because we just ripped off probably again the first and second phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But like this guy, his information pages, there's literally over three, and we won't go through them all, but there's literally over 350
settle in
character. Yeah, right. Get comfortable. Get a snack. Over 350 characters that this guy brought to life, and more importantly, nurtured them. Right? He didn't make like a stray cat, spit out these little kittens and say, "Good luck, kittens. I got some mice to chase down." No, he nurtured these characters. He made sure they were gonna be all right.
And that goes to his ability to see valuable ideas. And what I love about him, especially in the later years, in these Marvel movie years, there's a lot of interviews with Stan the Man. I was watching a couple today in preparation for this, and what I walked away with was such an amazing feeling, because he seldomly seemed to want to talk about his successes. Rather, he wanted to talk about the times he was turned away, the times he was told no, the times he was told his ideas weren't good, because he was such an advocate for believing in your good ideas, for fighting for your good ideas, for pushing that. Don't let a know-nothing stand between you and what you know is right. And you see the people inspired by him took that lesson and ran with it. The Kevin Smiths of the world, the Quentin Tarantinos of the world, these cats all took those lessons that were made available to us.
What about all these comic book writers? Like, his DNA is in entire, Hall of Fame publishers, in their walls. Like they say, if those walls could talk, can you imagine what those early days were like? And again, I know you poo-pooed him, but he was also very much like somebody like Spider-Man was so opposite the standard when you're talking about a comic book main character. Like, Spider-Man would be a sidekick had he come out only a handful of years prior, but Stan Lee had the wherewithal to say, no, this is a story that needs to be told. It's not just 30-something-year-olds that are making a difference out there. So Stan Lee was, by all means, the first to put a teenager center stage, talking about issues that they had in school, talking about racial issues that were going on in the world. Like, Stan Lee did things. He was prolific, obviously, but he took shots, man. he did things that nobody else was willing to do, at least at that
He was
time.
fearless. He was fearless. He so believed in what he pieced together that he would stand by it. And 9.5 times out of 10, he was absolutely right. You know, even DC Comics and of course, everyone around the comic book industry is celebrating Stan right now.
Yes.
There's a ton to celebrate.
Rightfully
but, you know,
so.
his take on the Justice League, they're doing they for free. If you sign up for their kind of digital store, you can read for free the follow-up, this beautiful
Earth 6.
this beautiful tribute to Stan the Man and what he kind of thought of our, you know, DC legacy heroes, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman as the primary members of that Justice League. Seeing how important he was for all the industries, for all the creators. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. John, I wanted to ask you before I kind of kick the mic back to you. Do you have a favorite cameo of his? Because he became Mr. Cameo, from the strip club in Deadpool to reading the Mallrats script with Captain Marvel, one of my personal favorite, to all the theories about who he might be it the Watcher was a big rumor for a long time. Do you have any particular cameo that sticks out, or for you is it just awesome that we had so many years of kind of seeing Grandpa Stan hit the mat?
I know that, like, obviously, Mallrats is a huge one and kind of like the first one on your particular radar. I mean, he popped up in the trial of the Incredible Hulk. This is like the last hurrah of the Lou Ferrigno painted era. This is a Thor that looked more like he was coming out of the Vikings TV show than anything that we got in the comics thus far in either iteration. But I mean, for me, it's kind of an automatic. It's The Amazing Spider-Man 2, also co-starring myself, where, funny enough, I was situated. This is the graduation scene for anybody who is unaware of my IMDb page.
John's
the
crotch,
graduation
famous.
scene. The new cut, you see all of this, baby, bow tie included. But famously, for my retelling, I had a very clear shot, like 2-3 rows in front of a certain wall crawler's auntie. But there was a dude seated rather, I mean, I gotta say 4 or 5 seats away from her. And from that distance, and this is, again, like stadium seating, open backed, I'm sitting there, I was like, is that Stan Lee? Beautiful white hair, mustache, strong as Hercules, like gussied up, a bow tie even. I was like, yo, if that's Stan Lee, I'm gonna have to go give him a hug real quick. I'm like, boy. But I was not entirely positive. Fast forward.
Well, it was a black man.
Dum Dum's. Fast forward one of Dum Dum's million takes because she stinks on ice. All of a sudden, producer types come strolling over to that area. And again, this is only 2-3 rows in front of me, but slightly off to the side. And they lean over to this gentleman, whisper in his ear. And I'm thinking, oh, snap, they're giving Stan some stuff to do. The guy stands up. He starts walking back with these 2 producer types. Now he's walking by me, and I'm like, hey, that's not Stan Lee. But fuck if it doesn't look just like him. Which is the reason why he lost this particular extra, co-star. This particular fella lost his excellent spot, definitely in the camera shot, because he looked so much like the brilliant Stan Lee, and then got taken out of the shot. So that would probably be my favorite because of my own personal involvement. But what about yourself? I mean, Mallrats aside, what was your favorite Stan Lee appearance?
I'm going to disqualify Mallrats because it opened the world up to me.
Right.
I'm also going to disqualify Captain Marvel because the scene on the bus where he's reading the Mallrats script, clearly that scene was included for 2 people, Kevin Smith and me. I think my favorite is Thor Ragnarok, where he plays the barber, like the nearsighted barber, mainly because they made a Hot Toys of that. They made a $150 action figure of Stan Lee as a space barber. That's just tremendous. That's how do you get better than that?
One way or the other, it always comes back to toys for Charlie. It is absolutely unbelievable. You can
I don't know
bet
what
on
you're
it
talking about. Looks around my KB Toys of an office.
Every single time. But also we had opened up this segment. I mean, obviously we can do an entire episode just talking about Stan Lee's character creation. We could do a different episode about his impact on storytelling, specifically within this venue. We can do a different episode on his cultural impact because, as we mentioned before, the stories that he was telling regarding different age groups, regarding racial issues that were going on in the country. I mean, he did a hell of a lot. He did a lot, and we were kind of still robbed. I mean, the gentleman lived a very long and full life, but we were still robbed as far as I'm concerned, because even towards the very twilight of his career, he was putting more good into the world than anything he was possibly taking out. And there were certain parts of the end of his towards the end of his life that were not particularly happy. I mean, there was allegations of elder abuse, and there were still towards the very end questions of compensation happening, ownership of characters, all of that jazz. But I really don't want to fixate on all that, because this is indeed a celebration of his life. But we started off by mentioning kind of that letter to the editor section.
Yes.
Charlie, I gotta tell you, as like a young cat, single digits, 10, 11 years old even, you read a comic book back then, it's all about what's going on. It was at that point also about the connectivity between titles, which was a relatively new thing as far as I was aware of. But you weren't done reading the comic until you got to the very end of the book. And I'm talking about the yellow pages towards the end. And if any one of us out here is a comic book properties fan more than they were a comic book reader, I understand. I get it. There's nothing wrong with that. But I feel a little bad because there's aspects of comic book fandom that you were missing. And in this case, the letters to the editor were so informative to me. The bullpen bulletins at the end of comics, specifically the Marvel comics, were so informative to who this guy was. It wasn't just that these were amazing stories and amazing characters that were created. I want to get back to that really quickly too, but the bullpen bulletins were an insight into this individual as a creator, not just his creations, because those do speak for themselves and tell you a lot about who the person was that put that stuff into the world, that content into the world. But these were literal conversations that he was having with us, the readers. And he knew this, right? That's where the famous Nuff said comes from, which, if anybody who doesn't know, that's where Nuff said comes from. He would say what he has to say, what's happening in the Marvel Universe, what you can expect, what you can look forward to. Nuff said. Like, he was one of these guys, he was as generous with himself as he was with anything else. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I mean,
for you, was it the cameos that you're like, I know who this guy was? Or, did you have a different experience? Because you were still a youngster.
Yeah, for me, it started with just kind of seeing a peek behind the curtain with Mallrats. I wasn't much of a Marvel zombie, so the DC equivalent never reached the heights of kind of Stan answering people. It was only after the fact. And I will forever mourn the fact that the podcast era started so far after his time, because I think in this day and age, those letters to the editor, it would have been a weekly podcast. He would have read 5 letters, answered it. It would have been called, Stan Lee, Nuff said. And he would have, once a month done one with Kevin. It would have been 7 hours long with Kevin Smith to go over every other question. John, as time collapses, though, I'm going to kick it to you. For me, the legacy of Stan Lee is just knowing that no matter what the story is, no matter what the character is, no matter the trials and tribulations that these characters go through, there is someone steering the ship for the universe. And I knew that Uncle Stan, Grandpa Stan, would never let these characters far too to pull too far away from what made me love them. When he was editor, when he was overseeing it, when he was asked about how he felt about these creations, he made it cool to love it. Like you said, he made it cool to care about it. He took such pride and passion in making these stories grow larger and the audiences grow larger. For me, that's a huge legacy that begins and ends with his love for this 4-color funny book craziness. What's your final thoughts on the man, what would have been the man's 100th birthday? What are your final thoughts on Stan?
Well, it actually goes back to a point that you had kind of brought up rather, where again it wasn't just about the creation. For him, Charlie is a very thirsty boy. It wasn't just about the character creation and kind of spawning them out into the world, but nurturing the characters and indeed making sure that they stayed on track, that they didn't kind of like, that they didn't wander off into territory that was really never their intention. He was a shepherd just as much, if not more so, in the latter years as he was a creator. So sometimes that means wrestling the steering wheel back away from someone who you've kind of like given control over to. So there's like a very famous story where there was a Daredevil comic that came out. This is like mid '60s, I believe, and the kind of overarching story was given and the art was produced, and then the writer stepped in to say, okay, here's dialogue, here's this, here's that, and in really the quintessential editor-in-chief fashion, he looked over everything. He didn't rubber stamp shit. Not Stan the man. He said, okay, well, this is a Daredevil book, so this is wrong. But the cat had already been paid, and he's like, well, writer, I'm not going to pay, the company is not going to pay you again, even though you fucked up. I'm going to take responsibility, and he, Stan Lee himself, rewrote the issue. He rewrote it. This is a guy that had the chutzpah, right? Mr. Lieber himself, he had the chutzpah to do what needed to be done. He didn't throw a parade for himself. He didn't shout it from the rooftops. He didn't berate anybody. He said, you know what? This is wrong. You got your pay, whatever. I'm going to go ahead now and do for free what really you should have done originally. And that's the courage of your convictions. That's when you know when something is wrong, but more importantly, you know how to write it. And he just did it. That's who Stan Lee was. He could sit there and wax poetic with the very best of them. If you look at any of his prose, you know that without question. But the bottom line is, if it's something that needed to be done, he had no problem rolling up those sleeves and just doing it himself. Look, he means a lot to anyone who even casually refers to themselves as a comic book fan, because he is not just a guy who left his stamp, he left his DNA in only the characters that he created, but in the storylines that followed, and in all the characters and storylines that he inspired. That to me is the big thing. He was an originator. Did he write the first comic book stories? No, obviously he did not. But many would argue he did it the best. Very much so. Maybe the best to ever do it. And look, 100 years from now, his name will still be synonymous with storytelling and world building and inspired character creation. But more importantly, and to me, what really rings true is that he eradicated the idea that nice guys finish last. That's some shit that you can really take to the bank. If anybody tells you that Stan Lee is not the GOAT, then he, Charlie Boy, much like George Toy Boy Lucas, is a goddamn liar. Because Charlie, Han shot first, baby.
John, I know.
Enough said, baby. Happy birthday.
Oh,
Excelsior!
Excelsior indeed. John, we look
Stand.
back at 100 years of Stan Lee, and it was nothing but good times. Now let us look to the future. On this last episode of 2022, let's talk about the nerdy movies and TV shows that we have to look forward to. It's a weird year. As I cough randomly into the mic. It's a strange year with a lot of really great stuff. Let's not bury the lead. For me, it's been all about the television. The television has been such a bipolar story of quality ebbing and flowing. Some of my favorite stuff hit television this year. I'm a sucker for it, so like all was worth it to me. I'm kind of just a sucker. I'm a consumer. But some stuff I'm glad to see on this new horizon. So I'm gonna go line items. We'll start with TV, then we'll get into the movies. Flash is finally gonna wrap up. I'm very happy that CW gave him half a season to finish this long journey. It's the 9th season. Not a show that captured my imagination much after the first season. But after 9 seasons, worth celebrating. That wraps up. That starts in February.
It's a good run, man. It's a good run.
I mean, if you had your
druthers,
this would be 9 seasons in a movie because you'd have them pop up at the end of the Flash movie if you could.
Well, don't get crazy. I said we could bring the boy over, but he's gonna outrun everything else in that show,
including that giant.
If I'm not mistaken, it doesn't Flash represent kind of like the end of the Arrowverse as we know it?
Yeah. The all the other shows have wrapped up. February 10th. I'm very excited about this. Definitely going to be intended for kids, but Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, one of the big hit books to come out in the last decade. I'm super excited for it. This one I didn't know about until like production had wrapped. Are you a Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur fan, or just glad it exists? Not really your sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of ambivalent to it altogether. But I'm not above checking anything out. So
and you can't hate that.
Have my attention for a moment.
You can't hate that look. A giant red dinosaur with a little girl riding on top. Like, that's gonna win. I've seen 100 Jurassic Park movies. I'm shocked that's not how the last one ended, with Devil Dinosaur and Moon Girl. This one I didn't hear anything about until I was putting together this research. Harley Quinn, this February, the animated Harley Quinn, a very problematic Valentine's Day special.
Yes.
John, if I've learned anything about holiday specials, is that they only come in 2 flavors. The worst hunk of shit ever, Star Wars Christmas special. The greatest shit ever, Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special. I'm excited because they're honoring me. It is a Charlentines special. I think the animated
than Harley.
Who better? Her and her Poison Ivy lover. They had a tough time in season 2, so I'm curious to see where the special goes. I love this cartoon. I think it's one of the best things.
They're gonna work through it.
I think it's one of the absolute best things available, and we're in the prime of this sort of content. One show that I was so pleasantly surprised by, and then immediately stopped giving a shit, was Superman and Lois. Superman and Lois is getting season 3. They had to recast one of the kid actors because, like, the one just didn't show up to set, which is just...
Like, nah, I'm good.
Could you imagine? Just like, I'm not going to show up to this show that could go goddamn 9 seasons. John, Superman and Lois, did they ever do anything for you?
No. And I have a very checkered past with Superman and television because...
You love Smallville and nothing can compare.
As much as you, Charlie, adored Smallville, at the very best, I could ignore Smallville. At its worst, at its worst, I was
Me.
screaming like an angry old man on the lawn. But in this case, the lawn was a television. I'm like, no, 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 no. Not since, or rather, preceding Superman breaking Zod's neck for no damn good reason was, I think, the character of Kal-El, Superman Clark Kent, missed more so than Smallville. But that all being said, it wasn't Superman PTSD that kept me away from it. It was just really more the stories that they were attempting to tell. Like, that wasn't really interesting to me. And Homeboy made it for a pretty good Superman. You know, like the costumes were good, and you know, if you had asked me, well, what's something of value that came out of that whole Arrowverse, that would have probably been my answer. But I'm like, yeah, this isn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but I'm still not gonna give it my time.
Well, it's funny that you said it wasn't the worst thing you've ever seen, because something that might be the worst thing I've ever seen, Gotham Knights. CW is ending the Berlantiverse, the Arrowverse, whatever you want to call it, and they're starting a new universe where Batman's gone, so points, I guess. The new fixation in DC, apparently, for some creators, is like, yo, but what about the massive hole this guy with money will leave? Gotham Knights
First it was bad Superman. They're like, oh, everybody sit down, I got a great idea. Yeah, like the last 6 people that came in here. All right, here's your blank check. First it was bad Superman, was a million projects. Now you're like, Batman though is dead, bro.
I may never forget the Arkham Knight series of games that I love for setting this precedent. For just now, they like keep killing off Bruce, and a bunch of scrappy kids listen, if you've never been a Robin, stay the fuck out of protecting Gotham. I, as opposed to my bitter brother, will deal with 9 Robins teaming up. Red Robin, Blue Robin, Green Robin, Sunglasses Robin. Dude, Gotham Knights has to be one of the worst looking trailers I had ever seen in my life. The budget looks to have been slashed 80% from The Flash. I'm already grossed out.
It looked like a bad YouTube fan-created video. That's what it looked like. And the funny thing is, there have been some very good fan-created content.
Yeah, Bat in the Sun has been
in the DC world.
Yeah.
This did not look good. But that being said, will you watch even a minute of it?
There's a lot on the agenda this year.
You're kind of a masochist, though.
I am. You know
are.
what? Chances are, I'll want. Here's what I'll say. I will watch an episode, and I'm gonna force you to watch an episode because we're gonna review the first episode in March. March 14th, it comes out. The brothers Rivera will torture themselves, so you don't have to. Lovely viewers.
Rude.
I will do you a favor, though. We'll go from that inevitable garbage that is Gotham Knights on the CW to what seems to be set up for nothing but success over at Disney Plus, Secret Invasion. My nipples are going to need a month to untwist. I am so excited about Secret Invasion.
Fatal.
I have heard some rumors about who is or is not a Skrull, and who may have been a Skrull.
Spoiler alert.
If some of these characters have been Skrulling it for like years, my head's gonna pop off. I am so easily won over by like even an okay twist.
No, I get it.
Where if you're like, you know how Thor kind of sucks now? Skrull. I know it doesn't make sense. He's
it's very funny. For as much as we have in common, there are certain things that are very, very clear delineations where Charlie is one way and I'm like, entertain me, I dare you. The Skrull ability to basically be anybody is, for me, just behind time travel in undefensible storytelling. Like, oh no, they shot Captain Marvel in the face, and now she's oh no, it was a scroll. That's fine. It's fine. All my emotions, they don't count anymore. Whatever investment that I had, I'm like, nah, it was just a stupid scroll. That's when my racism shows. I'm like, yeah, scroll, patooey. There goes
John,
the neighborhood.
If done right, here's what I want out of Secret Invasion.
To not happen.
Just to give everyone my 2 cents. I want desperately that that Sam Jackson, who plays, help me out, I'm forgetting the character's name, Nick Fury.
Nick Fury?
I hope Nick Fury did die.
Fun fact, top
You know
of my
when
head, I was
he-
like, Nick Carter?
You know when they fake killed Nick Fury? I hope he really died. And since that point in Winter Soldier, right? He died in Winter Soldier? I think he died in Winter Soldier.
Who can keep track anymore?
That's true. I hope he died in that. And this whole time it's been a scroll. And it makes my heart happy. I, more than anything else, though, just need a little bit more Daredevil in my life. And while his new television show isn't scheduled for 2023, I will fully accept him showing up in Echo. Echo, I loved Hawkeye. I dug her introduction. More Kingpin, more Daredevil, more Echo. Let's go. You excited at all for Echo?
I'm excited for Echo in so much as I am the peripheral moving parts to it, because even in the comics, Echo kind of like rang to me as like a 7th or 8th Batman, Robin would in Batman. Like, oh, cool. So this character that's blind, oh, but what if we had a very similar character that fucking had something different wrong with them? Like, okay, no.
Yeah, you don't love that. You know, that's not your.
Mute is, you know my feeling on derivative anythings.
Yeah.
I don't even want to date 2 girls in a row that look alike, much less want to read a fucking character that's kind of carbon copy-ish. But where I will, hey, Joker joining us. What's up, Joker? Guys, if you haven't checked out Joker stream over on Twitch, do yourself a favor, check them out. Sometimes the bad guys tell the best stories, and by sometimes I mean most of the time.
Fact.
But yeah, I'm traditionally against derivative characters, but I will give you this. At least they painted her in the villainous light first. You're like, it's kind of the same, but it's different. At least they gave us that, and it's a minority group that really hasn't been very well represented in this forum. So for several of these reasons, I will be in attendance. You got me, Disney.
I'm going to speed up a little bit, but talking about derivative characters, Agatha, Coven of Chaos, Season 1.
Mutual.
I'm
all in for Agatha. You know this.
So you exceptions
I hate
that
derivative
prove the
characters, but I love the bad girl, baby.
You know what? Which be popping off. Someone
and
who's
also homegirls in it. Fucking her name is escaping me right now, but April Ludgate.
My girl's showing up left and right. Loki getting season 2. We're gonna find out what all this Quantum Mania is about. What's going on with What If, which is very exciting. Loki was a series I really enjoyed on the first watch through.
Amazing.
On the second watch through, some stuff took its time. Some stuff took its time. You know what's taken a lifetime to come back for me to finish up its story? John, give me my bright yellow and blue spandex. Give me my ruby visor. X-Men 97.
It's been a while.
Disney Plus. Holy shit. Do they want to keep up with DC's animation quality? So much so that they're going all the way back to the 90s. Yo, let's go. I cannot goddamn wait. My Adventures with Superman.
You popped when you saw Professor X rolling out with a giant, like, dustbuster looking wheelchair. You were like, ooh.
John, I am a sucker for the 12 times in the last 2 years that Marvel has been like all you have to do is hint to it. and I'm in.
Yeah.
However, DC striking back over at HBO Max. My Adventures with Superman, I've heard nothing about, but it's slated for 2023.
Is this
an
a
animated
personal memoir of yours?
I hope so. Because get me one of those watches that reaches out to Clark when I'm in trouble, because I'm always in trouble. And John,
It's an Apple Watch, bro.
Again, I got about 6 minutes left, but really quick, let's go through.
We ran long. You can go. I'm gonna give you till 56, so you can.
Perfect. Let's grab some popcorn. We'll grab you a nice tall Coca-Cola. I'll get myself a boozy seltzer. We got a year filled with movies. Some I'm excited for. Some, frankly, I couldn't give a fuck less about. One that started as the latter, and all it took was adding Bill Murray to make me excited as hell. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania allegedly is going to bring the noise, bring the ruckus come February, just in time for a very special boy. I would argue one of the best people I've ever known. One of the greatest people who's ever appeared on this podcast. But a young and handsome Charlie Rivera's birthday starts early. February 17th, Quantumania drops in theaters. John, where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? I know you hate scaling shit. Scale of 1 to 10 excitement level for Quantumania. I'm a full 10. My tip is red. Let's go.
I'm a 8. I'm coming in at a strong 8, which for me is good because I like you was not particularly fond of Ant-Man as a standalone storytelling kind of device. I felt like Ant-Man worked best in these group dynamics. The second, though, that they latched onto the let's have a pair of shrinking characters, I was like, all right, okay. She still owes me from that last season of Lost. So I'll give it to her. All right, Hope, you can fly around, not a problem. Now, in essence, everybody's all tiny, but I do appreciate the fact that they're now. It's a honey. I shrunk the comic book characters because then now they're all collectively in that world, and I very much suspect we're gonna get Bill Murray, mayor of Smallville, down there. So I'm if nothing else, I'm just very interested to see what the hell they're gonna do. But the fact that it's going to very much tie all into the whole Kang situation, because we are getting full blue face, not vanilla face.
I think it's
not
a helmet,
chocolate face.
but it still counts. It's still a blue helmet. John, I gotta ask you this though. Before you blew yourself like Kang,
You are creeping me out right now.
Joker brings up a very good point off of Twitch. Will this film, if it's off and poppin', will it wash the not so entertained taste out of your mouth for Ant-Man 1 and 2? I almost called him Ant-Man. Ant-Man 1 and 2.
Auntie.
The minute you give me something good, I forgive you for something bad. It's why all my ex-girlfriends get a second bite at the apple. Never a third. Almost always a second.
Speaking of your girlfriends, I thought that this high-pitched voice sounded familiar. Yeah, no, absolutely, because I didn't despise the first two Ant-Man flicks. They were just like okay. They were okay, and in particular the fact that they led into greatly, two more than one, into what was happening in the shared world, which is where I think Ant-Man really belongs best, because his standalone features, what can you do? You can only make him really throw down with another version of himself.
Yeah.
So unless there's a domestic dispute between him and Hope, we're not going to really see that again all too often. So,
And I hope they don't go down that comic road.
You gotta lose
Slapping
that
around.
filter. You are creeping everybody out, dude. What the hairy hell?
I didn't mean to hit that. I didn't know that was happening.
Please, please tell me you were kidding. Please tell me you're kidding.
I'm not funny enough to go into the Ant-Man voice. I've killed my brother. He's dead. He's tiny. He's shrunk down. I need you to, John, I need you to grow big. Yell Shazam.
Oh my God, that is highlight reel shit right there.
I'm
Dynamite.
looking forward to hearing the joke because I don't get filters in playback.
Oh my God, that is so good. Woo!
Joker stream calling for a medic for you. I wouldn't trust it, John. They're gonna wind up giving you clown paint.
Oh, that was so good.
John,
So look, I've called my shot before. I am a DC boy. Now that being said, DC doesn't need to be going around and patting themselves on the back, because what that means is these characters mean more to me than others. So that means that doesn't mean that you're going to get a pass in the Jon book and be able to trot out mediocre content and me say, oh great, let me get my decorative my collector cups of cola and gigantic tub of popcorn. No. I'm going to hold you accountable for taking care of my beloveds, and they have fucking not. What they have done with Shazam, and more specifically with Black Adam, is an atrocity. So thus far, no, I am not very much looking forward to this flick. I'm obligated to see it because of all the love that I have poured out and all the reading that I have done over my many, many decades of fandom. But no, I'm very much afraid of it, man.
Looks
I'm
bad.
very afraid of what they're going to do.
It looks lower budget. If I don't know if they could get a tax rebate, I would have probably just had them. I would have looked into the option of throwing it on Max.
It's
looks
not
bad.
even about budget to me, Charlie. It's like, what is this storytelling? What is the storytelling?
The fact that the first movie ends with the Shazam family was such a misstep. I don't know why DC's old rule was rush the story. I really was disappointed.
It's not even that it was the Shazam family that was the ultimate arc in their storytelling. They didn't even justify it. They're like, oh, and here's more characters that seemingly have this. So in other words, I'll do a little bit of fixing, because I never want to be the guy that complains about something and doesn't offer up an alternate version and how something could have been better. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but as poorly received, rightfully so, as Thor: Love and Thunder was, there was one particular aspect of it which didn't really make a whole ton of a sense, right?
The Shazam family at the end?
When Thor fucking turned all of the little orphans, I hate all the orphans in the whole world.
Say it again.
Basically took all these little children, all these little fucking little orphan Annies. I realized they weren't orphans, but
it's little orphan Annie.
And he empowered them to basically be mini Thors. That made as little sense as Captain Marvel Shazam saying, okay, now my family that all of a sudden I love, you guys are also as well as going to be Captain Marvels. They didn't bother justifying it. They didn't explain it away. Now, I would have said, hey, this person whom I'm fighting against, or these multiple baddies, I cannot be everywhere at once. If only there were more of me to go ahead and handle the fight. Oh, maybe I can make that happen, because magic is magic. And he shared the power. Not empower them all at his level, Charlie, but shared the power at his fingertips and said, okay, if I'm at 100% and I kind of like dole it out, right? If you got $100 in your pocket in 20s, that's 20 for you and 20 for you and 20 for you. Now he could conceivably be multiple places at once. And while he might not have been as powerful individually, he would have been able to affect a greater area. And what does that do, Charlie? That teaches the audience a lesson. Ultimately, isn't that what storytelling is for? Isn't the reason why we listen to, like, I don't know, myths, why we listen to moralistic little fucking traipses down the moral lane? Isn't that the point? Isn't the point that you could do more as a team than you can as an individual? But also, as well as they can't do it on their own, they need him to quarterback that shit. So he has that emergency button that he can hit saying, boop, boop, boop. I need the Power family to come back together. Let me give you each $1 right out of my pocket, and we can do this as a team. Would have made
That
so
sounds
much
like it
more
would be a
sense.
good movie, though, and DC wasn't interested in that at the time. I'm going to run through these real quick, and then I'm going to get to my final thought, because I got a question for you. John, after that, we got my personal... the film I think I'm most interested in seeing where it goes. We got Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, arguably the movie that kind of handled this concept of we're going to throw 7 versions of a character at you that are all going to be, well defined and really interesting. I thought Into the Spider-Verse was one of the greatest things Marvel has ever put together. I am very, very fearful of this sequel because it's being compared to one of my favorite comic book movies ever. With that being said, the promise of 100 Spider-Men doesn't mean they're going to focus on 100 and Spider-Women and Spider-People. But I'm very hyped up because one of the Spider-Men we're getting happens to be Latino, and I like when my people show up and shit. But other than Spider-Verse, we got the clusterfuck that it promises to be the Flash. We got the Marvels with my girl rolling through.
Here's the big problem, really quickly, because I know you're up against time. The Flash might be a great flick, and it's almost worse if it is, unless James Gunn is able to do some literal magic and kind of say like, okay, well, we're gonna use this and we're gonna shape it and make it make sense for what we want to do long term. What's gonna happen is potentially you might have an outstanding multi-reality flick, and they say, "Did you enjoy that?" None of it matters. Like that would be painful, but
I mean, it has to have a little bit of Flashpoint in it. So I feel like the end, no matter what, can lead into something great. But the Marvels, then we got Blue Beetle, which I've heard very good things about in previews. Kraven the Hunter almost has to be awful. Fox doesn't make good movies anymore with Spider-Man characters. They just pump out shit. And something that visibly looks bad to me, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is going to wrap up the year in December of 2023. John?
That's another one. It is literally meaningless at this point. When they're
again, we get to see some water.
You only hear the actor talked about in terms of playing a different character. You're like, well, this means this one Aquaman means even less than Flash does potentially.
The press tours are going to be interesting. So what are you hoping for the future? Employment as vibe, I guess. John, we talked about a lot of TV. We talked about a lot of movies. What are you most looking forward to?
Honestly, on the DC side, some continuity and direction. I'm just really hoping that basically jumping into someone else's toy box, that James Gunn can find a direction that they want to go to. And on the Marvel side, because it really is ultimately about the big two, that they can kind of right the narrative ship. Because this most recent phase has just been like a dumpster fire. There have been occasional points.
I've been totally satisfied.
Terrible to me. For me, there have been certain points of there have been like bright points. Moon Knight was a home run in my estimation. All the specials really. Werewolf by Night, absolute home run. But there were certain things that they put so much effort into that were, to me, just wasted time.
So what are you looking forward to? What specifically? What project? TV show or movie?
Well, no, I'm not going to mention one specific project. What I'm saying is I want to see James Gunn, like I was just saying, I want to see James Gunn mold the pieces that are salvageable for his new world, and I want to see Marvel right the ship and get back on track.
So just consistency,
properly,
solid execution.
No,
I want to see
not consistent mediocrity, which is what Marvel has had. I want to raise their level back up and make it all make sense. That's what I'm hoping.
I want more than anything for this stuff to justify all the monies that are going to come pouring in. Because, John, ultimately, to keep the good shit flowing, You gotta pay some bills, and we're no exception. So today, we are once again brought to you right before the new year. John, more than anything else, you have to make sure that your nuts don't have hair on it. Today, we're brought to you by Nut Shearers.
That one's cut. We lost that.
Oh,
we lost that sponsorship.
They didn't send. Oh, that's right, because we're not some sellout fucking pod who's gonna say, "Oh, for a few $100, we're gonna advertise for anyone." No. Today we are once again brought to you by products rather that we care about. We are once again brought to you by one of our absolute favorite bands, Bad Mary. You heard them during the intro. You're gonna hear them at the end of the show with one of their newest drops off of their holiday LP. Wondering where else you can catch their act? You can follow them over at Bad Mary Band across all social media platforms. You can support them over on patreon.com/Bad Mary Band. You can stay up to date at badmary.com for merch and upcoming performances. But my favorite part, John, is their entire discography, including that holiday LP, is available on every music streaming site. How fucking good is that?
Damn straight, it is good. It is great. But also, as well as you have to ask yourself, where we dropping with Sergeant Finesse? You can find him gaming over on Facebook. Facebook Gaming all day, multiple streams, outstanding video game content, supporter games, co-streams, giveaways, contests. Matter of fact, every once in a while, he's even doing a little Fortnite with X-Man Finesse. Don't be a sucker. Check him out today, because when the Sarge is on deck, you salute. GG, son. Charlie.
Yeah?
Damn straight, you best be paying attention. Charlie, we talked already about the legend of Stan Lee. We talked about what's coming up after the ball done do its dropping in 23. But Charlie, I want to talk about something that actually predates them both.
Ooh.
Because while Stan Lee was responsible for the creation of over 300 outstanding original character concepts, and while we have tons of dope storytelling coming our way in the very near future, there was something that came before.
Ooh, I like before.
Before even Siegel and Schuster did their thing, Charlie. Before comic book superheroes were dominating the theaters, were dominating the streaming services, even before they were dominating our backpacks and lunchboxes. There were the pulp characters. The pulp characters, Charlie, they did it first. I am talking about characters that have made the transition, many of them, to comic book form. They have made the transition to both the big screen and the small. But Charlie, before all of that, these characters came not in comics, in magazines. Ooh. You ever watch some of these period pieces where you got a little goober, he's sitting there, like freaking whatchamacallit, the hell,
Slingshot?
Like a Dennis the Menace slingshot sticking out of their overall back pocket.
A magazine the size of their chests.
Seemingly, they're reading like the Wall Street Journal, but there's like drawings of like a spider lady or Flash Gordon on the front. Hell, Flash Gordon had his cameo cut out of Christmas Story, which is a great tragedy.
I would kill to see that footage.
And you would be justifiable murder when that
no
took
judge would convict me.
So these pulp characters, which are now many of which, the majority of which, have gone by the wayside. Charlie, these characters predated our superheroes, and it is a damn shame. Dare I say it's a doggone shame. Because when I talk to you, Charlie, about a character, forget about their origination. If I say to you, hey, Charlie, what do you think about Conan the Barbarian?
Love him.
Charlie, what do you think about El Zorro, Don Diego de la Vega?
Better than Batman.
Ever heard of Tarzan?
Oh, not only have I heard of him, I've seen that movie.
We were just talking about Ralphie Parker's favorite, Flash Gordon. What about one of the biggest cinematic blunders in Disney history, John Carter.
Yes.
Charlie, these are characters that had their start in the pulp pages. So anyone who doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about, which I realize is quite often, the pulp world, these were literally pulp texture pages, like the cheapest paper that these mother suckers could come out with, because they knew they were just going to goofy kids who were going to read them, throw them away. And the operative word in that sentence, Charlie, is read them. Because largely, while there were occasional splashes of fantastical artwork, Charlie, I want you to think of what Ross has done for superheroes, right?
Alex
Think
Ross's
about
paintings.
What Alex Ross's depictions of things like Kingdom Come, or like, you know, he's got an entire Marvel series. Like he's able to do things visually that we can't wrap our minds around easily. Charlie, that was the norm. When you would pick up a pulp magazine starring Tarzan, or starring Conan the Barbarian, or starring maybe a familiar name to some, Doc Savage, they would have these beautiful, fantastical covers, bigger than the kid's head, and then you'd open them up, and then maybe there'd be a very interesting line drawing, but then there would be words. And I'm not talking about like a word blurb over the pow, bang, boom of our typical comic book fodder. I am talking about prose. I'm talking about sentences with punctuation, new paragraphs. Charlie, this was literature. That's who the pulp characters, that's how they got their start. Lady Spyler, Cthulhu had his little tentacle turn at bat. A Cull of Atlantis. I mean, these were characters that like they ran and ran and ran. The Green Llama, maybe a little superhero action for you. I mean, these were, and by llama I don't mean the goofy long-necked animal. I'm talking about like the Dalai Lama. This was the Green Llama. He could throw down though, son. Who else?
Dalai Lama with attitude.
Maybe if you pry the easy trigger finger away from Homeboy over in Rust, the Shadow knows. These are pulp characters. Now, what's interesting is the way that we look at our superheroes, kind of having made that journey from comic books to TV to movies. These pulp characters had a very similar transition. So they went from Joker, it's never too soon, bro. US Comics, it can happen yesterday, and we're gonna talk about it. But the pulp characters, they went from the pulp pages, the giant magazines intended for kids, but they went to the comic strips in the newspaper. Those characters, they went to the radio. So you could go ahead and figure out your little message from Little Orphan Annie and find out that you have to drink your Ovaltine. Son of a bitch! They went to the radios, and then they
Last time on The Shadow.
they also made their way into the movie theaters, but not in these long form main events that we're getting. No, they had these little serials that would play before a flick. So the old
you must have been so excited.
Your nickel
getting you into those theaters.
The beard off of your face.
You must have loved it.
Hard,
your little
beard
ink-covered
is
hands.
Gonna spin around
and
backwards
your pulp magazines.
like Daffy Duck and the shotgun going off his face. Your beard is gonna be behind you. You're gonna have to watch a giant game like this. Oh, did you see what just happened? How dare you, sir? But yeah, for a shiny nickel, basically the old timers, they can go and they would see like 2 cartoons. They would see a serial, a live action serial of any one of a number of these characters, and then they would watch their main attraction. They were there damn all day, which must have been pretty sweet. Pretty good, if you're asking me. But Charlie, I'm gonna throw it right to you.
Yeah.
Clearly, I have a great affinity for these characters that they did it first. Obviously, we know I worship at the altar. We both do, of Superman, the big blue Boy Scout. What he does, what he means to this current generation of superheroes, the underwear on the outside do-gooders. But while he was the first comic book hero, he wasn't the first hero. So like I love these characters. Many of them are just as interesting, if not more so, than what we got now, running through Gotham and similar towns. So are there any pulp characters that like kind of stick out that ring true? There's one I'm thinking of that's very pulp inspired, but I don't want to say
the man himself.
Rocketeer. Basically, anything with the word rock in it, Charlie is all about.
I'm just easily influenced. The Rocketeer, when it first came to my attention, was in the WB Saturday morning movie. The rights to the Rocketeer, which was an utter flop in theaters, it came out kind of on the heels of Batman hitting the silver screen. The wrong lesson was learned by producers, and they just decided people must like the pulp elements. Rocketeer from Disney, I thought was the biggest movie of all time. It was on all the time. It was like
is a banger. Anyone who has not taken the time, it's a banger.
3 out of 4 Saturdays, the Rocketeer would either be the 10 a.m. movie, the 12 p.m. movie, or the 2:15 movie. The Rocketeer must have cost a nickel to fucking get the movie rights to. I thought there was no one cooler. He had Han Solo's gun defuturefied on his hip. He had a double barrel jetpack and one of the greatest helmets in cinema history. And it opened my world to the Pulp comics. By the time I discovered the Rocketeer, John, we had a computer. So I was able to look up like the old Rocketeer stories, which led me to The Shadow when that disappointing movie came out, which led me to his comic strips, which led me to The Phantom, which led me to Doc Samson.
So what's interesting is, especially for kind of like a whippersnapper like yourself, the Rocketeer, while in essence certainly being a pulp pulp,
he's like, I can't believe it's not Pulp.
He's an homage character. So
yep.
the actual character that you could really say is the grandfather in essence of the 1991 flick that we got was Rocket Man. So Rocket Man was like a black and white, also a serial, because this was like the further adventures of this type of storytelling that they had, which is very much in the vein of the comic books and period. The backpacks were almost carbon copies, to the point where like if you really didn't bother doing any research, you'd say, no, well, this is clearly
the same guy.
Clearly who they're talking about. But Rocketeer actually was an original creation, but totally. And I'll give you another one while we're in that vein.
Yeah.
Indiana Jones.
Yes.
Indiana Jones has it fingerprints of these pulp characters all up and down his leather jacket, whip, and I'll let you fedora probably. Indiana Jones could have easily been in this list. Now it's interesting because Lucas, though he's a liar, and Spielberg as well, they openly talked about it and said, like, when we were kids, those were the kids I was talking about that would plunk down a nickel and be at the theater all damn day. They'd watch their funnies, then they would watch their serials, and then whatever the main flick was. But that's what inspired their creation of Indiana Jones, and obviously Rocketeer is going to be very much the same way.
John, I'm going to break my own rule, and I'm going to talk about the graphic that's available only to those watching us on Twitch, Facebook, or YouTube. John, in the far left corner of the graphic I threw up, if you could pull us up for a second, he had the blue kind of like head mask, the red onesie, and the black pants. Who is that?
That would be former quarterback of the New York Jets, Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon, the strip, the not the comic strips, but the pros on AOL dial-up were so easy to get that I would live in this world. I would download like files, and they would have like 70 issues, and I would just sit waiting for porn to download on another screen.
Whoa,
I would
whoa.
just,
What a
I would
bad
just
boy.
watch. I would just read through adventure after adventure. What was great was all the splash pages were like in their own file. So I never had like the prose and this is the photo that came with it. So I had like 30 amazing pieces of art, and then I had 50 stories to kind of
Put them in
assemble
wherever
myself.
You want.
John, it was some of the most fun I ever had was reading those prose. And a character like Doc Samson is a great example of like, I don't give a fuck about him, but if you give me one of his stories, they're so digestible.
Well,
you know,
those stories. Doc Samson was like Superman before Superman.
Yeah,
like he really freaking was.
There's something about these characters, and more importantly, the worlds they develop, the future of the pulp comic, the past of the pulp comic, the modern.
What was really interesting to me, Charlie, is that and where the great divide is, because if you can say that so it's like chimpanzees and humans, like chimpanzees didn't turn into humans. So anybody who's in the NBA who like has that misconception, the Earth isn't flat, and chimpanzees didn't turn into people. All right, you guys know who I'm talking about. But we have a common ancestor. That's where we lie now between the comic book world and the pulp fiction world. To borrow a little something from Tarantino. However, it's important that we look at the differences also. So it's not just in terms of the visual styles that we got these stories, because the stories in and of themselves have one big difference. It's not just that these characters can do amazing things, like fantastic type things that you want to talk about when you're waiting for the bus at the bus stop before school. These characters, Charlie, largely, they lived in a bubble.
Yeah.
Okay, because in the comic book worlds, in these shared universes that first the comic books really made a point to hit on, and now the cinematic and TV worlds where they say, look, these are all these crazy, amazing things going on, and isn't it fantastic? Yeah, sure it is. But also, as well as the tendrils of one have to go into another, and everything needs to be connected. That ends up, for my buck, it's a good thing, but sometimes it can be a limitation, because in much the same way that a character's origin flick has a very specific formula, whereas they have to tell you, here's this person, here's how they gained the ability to do amazing things, but we have to now quickly establish here's their villain. Here's their pushback. Here is their nemesis. This is the problem that we have to do, and you have to develop all that shit too. At the same time, where you can now set up a third chapter where hilarity ensues and everybody's heads get knocked together like a Three Stooges. But also it's formulatic. You could fucking call your shot way before it happens. Now you factor into that, Charlie, also, as well as they have to account for where other characters, super or otherwise, where they are in the moment. You have to establish that, and you also have to establish how are they going to be connected. It's a lot of work to do within a small time frame. You know what the pulp characters didn't have to deal with?
That bullshit.
Any of that shit. They existed in a fucking bubble. So when Conan the Barbarian was in some shit, I didn't sit back as even a little kid thinking, well, Flash Gordon's going to show up and save his bacon. No. Conan had to deal with that shit by his own Crimerian self. And to me, that storytelling often, not always, but more often than not, is far more interesting. Because there's no bailout. There's no safety net. There's no... That's like Conan is walking the trapeze high wire, which I'm pretty sure has never happened, but he's doing it without a net, and the elephants are braying, and the clouds are goofing around, and the kids are screaming for popcorn. He had to really focus, otherwise Conan gonna be in big trouble, and that's where the pulp characters really, really differentiate, because
it's also where they shine. It's where they shine because all these pulp characters,
show you what they're really worth.
What I really loved about it is the formula that rose from a lot of these pulp characters is you give them stuff and then you take it away. So like for the Rocketeer, it's like now he don't got his rocket pack. So it's like that's just the dude in a helmet now, and he's on a balloon. You take away Doc Samson's powers. What happens next? Those formulas are just as good.
Those are almost like a given, like on a very special, Domino Lady. But another character that, especially growing up in the '80s, that just like took off to the point where you're like, well, this always was, right? This was not something that was birthed from somebody's mind hole. This just, you woke up and there they were. Buck Rogers, you could put into that same category also. So a lot of these fantastical worlds,
or my version, Duck Dodgers.
But yeah, so they gave us these amazing characters that did amazing things, but they also had that same origin point, and it was reality, right? So now we're getting somebody who can fly through the sky and shoot fucking lasers out of their butthole, and we just take it for granted. Yeah, sure, that's normal. That's normal. Not here, brother. Not here. If you had somebody that could do if they could even like bend their finger backwards because they're a double joint, you're like, oh shit, you went crazy, because they all had an origin point of reality, which ultimately made them more grounded, because these characters, while they were doing amazing things, were also looking around saying, yo, this is some crazy shit, right? Is this my imagination? John Carter didn't get to like the multi-arm swinging, half-butt naked princesses, on Mars, thinking, yeah, this is just like a random Tuesday. Joker, get going, brother. Thank you as always for dropping by. Check out Joker stream over on Twitch. Do yourself a favor. But yeah, Charlie, that's my ultimate point, is that these are great characters because while they were doing otherworldly, very unfamiliar things, had their start as familiar characters. We knew who they were to begin with. So when they were going through some shit, it was that much more real. So when it transitioned over to the other formats, you're like, oh shit, okay, I get it. The Shadow does know. Oh, he can make his nose real big? Oh, snap, that's crazy. Oh, a little bit of heroin problem. What are you going to do?
I fully suspect that these characters still have a modern future that's just waiting around the corner. They're so good. And what I love about it, at the time, they were speaking to their reality. They were speaking to the future, the way they saw it. They were speaking to their modern as they saw it. But now, in such a great way, all of these characters start in a classic setting, and we get to avoid the things that we're overburdened with now. Every superhero has a cell phone and something to hack. Seeing, the future that Flash Gordon had in store for us is such an escape in a way that right now, you talk about in entertainment where the gaps are that need filling. These pulp heroes, these pulp timelines, these pulp adventures are begging to take another bite at both the big and small screen.
Totally.
And me for one.
In comic book
wait.
formats, in long form prose formats, absolutely.
Dynamite has made a fortune. Django and Zorro, one of the best books in the last 15 years. Django Unchained came out 10 years ago. 8 years ago, I got Django and Zorro. Yo, what's up? Talk about some shit I'm dying for. They're constantly finding ways of bringing my boy the Rocketeer back. It's evergreen. These are evergreen characters. But evergreen stories.
Here's my final thought on the topic. Then we'll wrap.
Yes, sir.
In so much as all that they informed our current kind of crop of hero characters. Big screen, small screen, comic book, whatever, whichever your preferred delivery system. More to the point, and this is what I was originally saying before, they did what they did in a bubble. So it doesn't require always to connect every little tittle and jot that you have out there. It's okay and sometimes preferable to say, look, this is what we have to work with. Now the onus is on us, the storytellers, to kind of put something out there that's going to grab onto and keep hold of our viewer, reader, consumer's attention. And the way that you do that is not just by inspired character creation, but much like, taking it all the way back, much like our boy Stan the Man Lee, keeping their attention, making sure the car stays on the proper path, and doing it in such a way that the audience doesn't feel preached to or spoken down to, that they come away with it with something new that they didn't have before. That's how you do it. Pulp characters knew it. Stan Lee knew it. Jon and Charlie Rivera of US Comics knows it. So Charlie, why don't you do all the people a big favor at the 126 mark, we went long, for the final time in 2022, tell the good people how we wrap up each and every show, every episode of US Comics Cast. But you know what though? Go ahead and turn your mic on so that we can hear you.
There it is. There's a couple quick steps. First, you gotta turn the power on. Then you gotta turn that volume up. Then you gotta tune Bad Mary in. Open up the window wide and scream out into the night sky. Save the space guy!